This time on Scuba Nation.
We're paying homage to the History of Diving Museum in Islamorada, Florida. This place is a must-see while traveling in the Florida Keys. We also used the same helmet the legendary Art McKee wore as he introduced recreational scuba diving to the masses right here in the fabulous Florida Keys. So we're kicking it old school, this time on Scuba Nation.
Who is Scuba Nation? Billy C., Boston born and raised.
What are we doing? What are we doing?
Hey, Billy C would dive a puddle if it was deep enough.
Bitch and Mitch, Southern boy.
Diving's like pizza. When it's good, it's great, and when it's bad, it's still good.
Two ordinary guys with a thirst for getting wet and exploring all things scuba. We are Scuba Nation. One nation underwater.
Presented by Leisure Pro.
Welcome, Scuba Nation. I'm Mitch.
And I'm Billy C.
You know, the Florida Keys is rich in diving history, and if you're ever down here in Islamorada, you want to visit the History of Diving Museum. It's spectacular.
You know, we've been up and down the Florida Keys 1,000 times, and we always drove by. Big mistake. We finally walked through this History of Diving Museum, and then we were wowed. What a spectacular place. We are going to take a journey through diving history and how recreational scuba diving started here right in the Florida Keys.
That's right. We're going to kick it a little old school and visiting the History of Diving Museum this time on Scuba Nation. So I don't know how many times old Billy C and I did trucking it up and down the Florida Keys. And when you get to about mile marker 83 in Islamorada, there she was on the right-hand side, the History of Diving Museum. And here's Billy and I. We're avid divers, and we've never stopped here before. So we finally paid this place a visit. And let me tell you, folks, I was wowed the moment I got into the gift shop. I mean, they had this nice looking Jake sitting there, so you got some photo opportunities. So I was thinking, Santa Jake, I'd like a new BC. Let's go with the new dive computer and all expense paid vacation to Key West. You've got the old Miller Dunn helmet you can put over your head for another photo opportunity. The door to the museum looks like somehow 20,000 leagues under the sea. I mean, and we weren't even in the museum yet. Underwear donated by Mitch's Scuba Nation. That's where I left them.
An underwater contraption fit for a king. Dr. Edmund Halley, he was an astronomer. He would look up to the heavens and dream and figure out what comets were doing, but he also looked beneath the sea, and he invented this crazy diving bell. These were the first things that were submerged with a person in it, and this was the precursor to the diving helmet.
I'm Nemo.
I'm Dory.
Hey, how you doing?
Now, Art McKee, what an interesting individual this guy is. He was a treasure hunter, and man, I loved his getup. He had these short black shorts. He wore Chuck Taylors, the Converse high tops, black of course, and he was just that wild, swashbuckling fool that would just go ahead and dive into the ocean back in the 30s and 40s when it was still a mystery. The ocean was still such a mystery until these helmets came available and started the recreational revolution for scuba diving. And that happened right here in the Florida Keys. Hey, so part of this diving history museum, we checked out the San Pedro wreck. This was sunk back in the 1700s, and it would be typical of one of the Spanish galleons that Art McKee would go look for with his helmet on.
Pretty close to Alligator Reef, you still have a bunch of relics left over from the wreck. I'm talking about ballast stones, I'm talking about anchors, I'm talking about cannons. It's all still down there. The wreck is relatively shallow too. It's only about 15 feet deep. So the snorkelers can enjoy it and have a great time. I really enjoyed the wreck.
And this was a wreck that Art McKee would have been looking for and found Spanish bullion, Real 8s, silver bars. You know, this was Spanish galleons that were going from Cuba to Spain. In the 1700s, there was multiple hurricanes, multiple shipwrecks, and Art McKee was that guy to put on that helmet and go down to look for it. And he found his own mother lode.
There's a lot of life on this wreck. There's a lot of fish on this wreck. Got to see a little puppy nurse shark that was so cute. I just wanted to hold it.
And what's great about the San Pedro wreck is the ballast stones are still there from the 1700s. There's cannons down there and also the anchor of the ship. So, you know, this whole experience is about history and diving back into that history. And here we are back into the 40s in Islamorada, looking at ships that sunk back in the 1700s, using equipment from the 40s, and really getting a taste of that experience. And we did it here in the fabulous Florida Keys, and what an experience it was. I'm blown away. It's such a great feeling to get to use a piece of history in our modern day of diving. Folks, if you are traveling up and down the Florida Keys, please make a stop in Islamorada at the History of Diving Museum. I promise you, Billy C makes 100% promise that you will be wowed.
More from the History of Diving Museum coming up next. So even if you're not an avid diver or never even dove before, you're going to love the History of Diving Museum because it is loaded with nautical antiquities, actual treasure, Mark V helmets, and all kind of dive gear. The antiquities in this place will just blow your mind away.
My husband Joe and I were both physicians in Ohio in very high-stress medicine. Our escape was scuba diving. And one day, as scuba divers, we walked into an old junk store, really, and we saw a diving helmet. And that day, we caught an incurable disease. The collecting bug bit us. And eventually, we accumulated probably one of the biggest collections in the world. We started to wonder about the history of it. We published a book about the history of diving, and we realized a couple things. 20, 30 years of collecting, we realized this is a story that needed to be told. Well, what better place to do a museum about the history of diving than in the Florida Keys?
The museum is awesome. It's a venue for everyone, from small kids to the older generation that has been diving. A lot of times we get people who stop in who are already certified divers, and they assume that they know what they're going to see, and then they come in and they see the timeline that goes back 4,000 years, and they just have that wow factor.
I would like a large cheese pizza with pepperoni and mushrooms.
It's a world story, and I believe we do that really well as an international museum about the history of diving.
Welcome to the museum, and welcome to the Parade of Nations. I'm Dr. Joe Bauer, the founder of the museum, and I'd like to take you on a trip around the world of international diving helmets.
The museum is wonderful for people of all ages. For little kids, we have scavenger hunts. They can look around each exhibit and find something and check it off. And we also have little Lego divers hidden all throughout the exhibits. So we try to see how many you can count. And when you get up front, we'll let you know how close you are.
Now, for me personally, one of the best parts of the museum was the area designated to marine biology, and William Beebe, who was considered the modern father of marine biology. So that passion started so young with me, watching Jacques Cousteau and Sea Hunt. So to see the exhibit with William Beebe, the modern father of marine biology, that blew me away.
2 years ago, we opened this wonderful research library that you're standing in now. And the library, our oldest book goes back to 1535. the story of people going underwater.
They also have a section where they collected historical scuba toys. And in that section, I got to see something I haven't seen, my God, in 40 years. And it was the actual underwater G.I. Joe. It took me back big time.
Now, folks, you see this guy right here? This is the G.I. Joe that I had when I was a kid. It's got this little tube at the top. You've got the squid, you kick it, and of course some underwater treasure that you can find in the bathtub.
It's the vision of my husband and myself to create a museum so that everybody could see this story of how we got to where we are as divers today. Come and pay us a visit. Don't drive by, drive in. And I promise you, you will be astonished.
Welcome back. We're exploring the history of Diving Museum in Isla Mirada.
And now, Mitch, we're at the South Florida room. And South Florida helmets really started the underwater revolution because these open bottom helmets from South Florida revolutionized diving. And they gave normal people like you and me sports diving with the Miller-Dunn 1. They gave us marine biology with the Miller-Dunn 2. And they gave us treasure hunting with the Miller-Dunn 3.
And this is the one that Billy and I are going to be diving with tomorrow, right?
Yes, that's right. And you will dive into history with a helmet that hasn't been underwater for maybe 60, 70 years.
This helmet is really, and the forerunners to this helmet are kind of icons of the industry. Made by a company named Miller-Dunn, Incorporated, out of Miami, Florida. And they started manufacturing diving helmets around 1916. Their diving helmets, the way they marketed them, really broke open the recreational diving in the Florida Keys and really all across America. A lot of people, especially recreational divers, don't realize that from 1916 to the late 40s, there was really no other way to get underwater except by the use of these shallow water helmets.
John gave us some classroom and pool time to get us ready for our open water dives with the Miller-Dunn diving helmet. We talked about rope signals, flow control, and how to remove and don the helmet underwater.
This Style 3 Miller-Dunn was the one used by Art McKee down here in the Keys. As the story goes, Art McKee may have, and this helmet may have been responsible for the first recreational diving certification anywhere in the country. He would take divers out and put them out on the reef, down on this helmet, just power it, getting air to them through the hand pump that we use today.
So, this is my air supply?
Yeah, Mitch, I pretty much have your life in my hands, because if I stop pumping, you get no air.
I need to call my agent.
I'm going to need a new co-host.
Upon successful completion of the dive, he would give them a certificate, Florida Keys Reef Diver.
Making Mr. Art McKee very proud. This will be my first time ever going diving in a pair of Converses. Let's go.
Mitch, you channeling your inner Art McKee?
Art McKee.
I like that. Oh!
How you feeling? Go. Okay, let's party.
It was a real treat to wear that Miller-Dunn helmet, the same one you're seeing here, underneath the water. And for me, wearing that helmet underwater, it was like a time capsule. And you're walking on the bottom of the ocean instead of kicking. Totally different sensation. My head felt like it was in a submarine. I couldn't help but think about how this equipment introduced the underwater world for the first time for so many people. And wearing this equipment almost 60 years ago, this was the first time they've ever seen the underwater world from this vantage point. My God, they must have thought this was a different world right here on planet Earth. Yeah, so I wrapped up my open water dives with the Miller-Dunn heavy dive equipment. I guess I can add that to my C card now.
For Billy C., I'm Mitch, One Nation Underwater. Thanks for watching.